The first generation thinks about survival. The one that follows tells stories. So opens a new book by a woman who was one of many children in the 1970s and 80s, born in Asia but raised in Canada, away from the watchful eyes of their parents. Hers was an astronaut family, a term coined by an anthropologist decades later. It describes families from Taiwan, Hong Kong, and elsewhere, where one or both parents work in Asia while their kids grow up in a foreign country. This is a story about family, betrayal, and redemption, one that will no doubt speak to many Lower Mainland readers who grew up the same way. Here to talk about The Astronaut Children of Dunbar Street, a memoir, is author Wiley Wei-Chiun Ho. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Easy question to get us going, Wiley. What made you write the book? It seems like a story that you've been trying to tell for a very long time.
Yes, that's actually not the easiest question, but I will answer it like this, which is I think I had to write the book ultimately for my younger self. I grew up in a way that so many astronaut kids and families, we didn't talk about what was happening. There was no term for it in the 80s when I was growing up. And so there was just this deep silence you know, about what was going on. On the one hand, we were quite fortunate. We lived in nice houses and in nice neighborhoods such as Dunbar. And so like there was nothing really wrong, right? We had everything covered. But within like inside these nice homes, there is a different story. And so I wanted to explore that and talk about it because after decades of silence, it was, I guess, I needed to write about it first before I could even discuss it.
Now, the quote I mentioned off the top, the first generation thinks about survival, the ones that follow tell stories. You're very much in the latter category, yet you call yourself Generation 1.5, somewhere in between. Why Generation 1.5?
Yes, I think as many astronaut kids are, we straddle worlds. And I feel like I'm between generations too, where I came to Canada as a 9-year old, um, but I still feel very attached to Taiwan and my first culture and my first languages. Um, and of course, I've been here the majority of my life now, but I still feel this pull. And so 1.5 is like somewhere in between. Maybe it's like 1.6 now, but I definitely still feel like I'm between things.
Now, when we talk about the astronaut children of Dunbar Street, we're talking about your siblings, your older brother, and then you four girls. You were born to a doctor and a hospital administrator, but then something happens. Your parents decide to go back to Taiwan, perhaps unwilling to deal with the loss of status that comes with starting over in a new country. Do I have that about right?
I think roughly that's true. I think with so many immigrant families that come from professional backgrounds, they find it so difficult to have their qualifications recognized in Canada. And certainly, something like medicine, it was very, very difficult for my father. He had hoped to practice in Canada, but language barrier and also very, very difficult to qualify at that time. This is the 80s we're talking about. It probably still is very difficult. But my father just couldn't go back. He was told he had to go back to medical school, essentially, even though he had had 20 years of Western medicine practice under his belt. He just said he just like he was closing up on 50 at the time, and it was just way too hard. And then the thought was, oh, they could get labor jobs. But yes, so to your point about sacrificing a standard of living and really like esteem and respect and that, I think it was just too big a gap for them to hurdle. And they could go back to Taiwan and like right back into a community that would welcome them and respect them. Like I think it was although it was a really difficult choice for them, I think it was also kind of a no-brainer and they could make way more money in Asia than they could here.
Just as an aside, I love the story of how your English name Wiley was inspired by John Wiley and Sons, the publishing house
Right.
that put out your father's medical textbooks. Did he tell you that story? Or did you sort of figure that out on your own?
I figured it out on my own because growing up, we didn't have a lot of books in the house, but we definitely had like Encyclopedia Britannica, all the educational tools, right? We had certain magazines and definitely Dad's medical journals. So I noticed that there was this preponderance of Wiley and Sons across like all the spines of the books. So I'm like, so I wonder if I was named, and yeah, when I chatted with my father, he was like, yeah, that's a great name.
Now, we talked about your parents coming here and going back, but there's also a very large geopolitical dimension to why they wanted to come here. What exactly made your family want to leave Taiwan in the 1970s?
hmm So I talk about this in the book. In 1979, there was a diplomatic break between Washington and Taiwan, where you know this one China observance switched from Taiwan to mainland China. And so my parents really feared that this meant the stability of Taiwan was going to be in great jeopardy. And my brother was turning 16 at the time, and he would have been conscripted for sure had there been war. And so they were really worried. And so they thought, well, we have to get our kids to safety. So that was the main motivation.
And so you come to Canada at age 9, but unlike your three
Mhm.
sisters, you would not go back to Taiwan to live. Instead, like your brother, you chose to stay here. So, two things. What did you and your brother have in common on that score? And perhaps were you too young to have formed those close bonds to Taiwan like your sisters did?
That's a very good point. I think I felt the most comfortable here being the youngest. And I think for better or worse, assimilated quite quickly. I learned English really fast. I had a great grade three teacher, by the way. Shout out to great teachers out there. Um, but my brother, I think, had a different reason. He couldn't go back because he owed military service. And so I think military service was mandatory until the age of 36. So he actually was kind of stuck here. But my three sisters who are older, they were teenagers when they came, and always felt, I think they were maybe generation 1.1, right? Like they definitely felt much closer to Taiwan. They had friends there. They just had deeper roots than I had.
Now, the book starts and ends with a return visit to Taiwan during COVID in 2021. Your father is sick. Your mom is deep into dementia. But reading that, I find that a lot of those old feelings are kicked up again. Those feelings of abandonment and betrayal. How was it for you to sort of go back under those circumstances, yet having to resolve those feelings?
Yes, and I write about it a lot, and I had to revise a lot because I think I was triggered. There's probably PTSD involved. And there are a few chapters in there about being stuck in a mandatory quarantine hotel room by myself for 14 days before I could join my family. And all those feelings of isolation and disconnection, dislocation came back. And it definitely made me revisit my childhood in a pretty deep way.
Do you find the book helps you make peace with that in a sense?
Yes, I think was it Joan Didion who famously said, "I write in order to know what I think." I might be paraphrasing, but something to that effect. And I think that is how many of us process what happens to us is through reflection. And if you like the written word, it's quite helpful to write about your experiences in order to like get under them.
So there's a catharsis happening in the process of writing the book.
I believe so. I believe so. Although I did try many different ways to write my story, including fiction, a mystery at one point. So I tried different ways to enter the story that felt easier, but in the end, I felt like because this is a story about, personal loss and reclamation, I felt like it had to be memoir.
I think one of the great things about the book is that despite there being an overarching narrative from front to back, you can pick out individual chapters, like when you talk about going camping with your family early on, and that can be a standalone piece of writing, or it's a great part of the overall painting that picture of being a family coming here from Taiwan. Um,
Mm. Thanks for that close reading, John. I appreciate it. Yes.
I I I really enjoyed the book. Your story paints a picture of Vancouver in the 70s, 80s, and beyond that is familiar to my generation. I think we're about a few years apart in age. You name check things like Expo 86, A&B Sound, Duran Duran,
Yes.
all of that, working in fast food, that's another great chapter. What's the early feedback on the book been like? Because, and I ask this because as I was reading it, I thought to myself, growing up in Richmond, I knew people like this. I grew up around people like you, and that this is going to resonate in a big way, not just for Taiwanese and Asian audiences, but for Metro Vancouver audiences, readers in general.
Yes, I very much hope so. I didn't, of course, set out to reach anybody, but I do think that there is a lot of interest in the community. I hear from people who aren't astronaut kids who say, "Oh, yeah, I went to school with you guys," or teachers who said, "Yeah, I taught a bunch of you, but you guys never talked really." Neighbors, and I do think that even today there are lots of communities, neighborhoods that are neighbors with us. And I think there's a curiosity, and perhaps there are a few misconceptions as well, which I hope to dispel. That we're not all the same, that we're not all like spoiled brats who race fast cars and wear designer clothes. Um, yeah, so I hope to reach different audiences. I also really am hoping that it will open up some conversations that are needed within astronaut families and also within the communities. So I hope it reaches a bunch of people. Early reception has been really positive. Yes.
Are there still astronaut families now?
Yes. I think that the first wave was the late 70s because of what was happening in Taiwan, and also in the 80s and 90s ahead of the Hong Kong 1997 uh, return. And so it's slowed now, but I think there are still families that are separated. And I think now the most recent waves are probably from places like the Philippines, but it's a very different situation where, the parents are here because of better work prospects in Canada, whereas in my situation, uh, the prospects were way better in Asia. Um, so I think there are still lots of separated families, and there's a lot of silence around that because I think there is this idea that if we don't talk about it, it can't be that bad. And so I hope this book will start some conversations for people because I think it's necessary to understand our own stories and to start some healing and to really to end the isolation that I see so often in these families.
Well, let's unpack that a bit. What advice would you have for today's astronaut families, or even folks like yourself who are obviously still getting over a lot of the things that you went through growing up? And I guess talking about it out loud is one thing, but what other pieces of advice would you have?
Um, I think communication is really the way we form community and to reach outside of ourselves. I think the chief problem with being an astronaut child and also the parents are very isolated. Sometimes it's typically a mother who is here with their children, and they're just like stuck in the house, doing all the things of supporting their kids cooking, cleaning, and all that, but they don't really get a chance to discuss what they're going through, and often there are lots and lots of issues. Um, yeah, without naming names, I mean they're always the things that you can pretty well imagine, right? Like extramarital affairs overseas, and like rupture within the family in so many ways. So what advice would I give? I would say, dispense with the shame. We can't feel ashamed of the situations that we find ourselves in. And I, as you quoted Hua Shu earlier, the first generation thinks about survival. The latter ones get to write about it. And I feel very fortunate that I get to write about it. But I do feel like a lot of parents just think about how to make the best for their children. And they don't get to discuss it. So you might have noticed that my book spans very ambitious 4 decades. My editor was like, "Whoa, that's a long span." But I wanted to be that ambitious because I wanted to show what it was like for the astronaut kid, but also what it's like for the parents and without giving too much away, I start as a kid, and then, of course, I'm an adult, and then a parent myself, and the insights that I gain as a parent, to better understand how parents could make a decision like leaving their kids in a completely different country or halfway around the world. So I wanted to show that fullness.
Do you find yourself having a greater sympathy for your parents having come here without a playbook now that you're a parent yourself and making those sorts of I don't want to say life and death decisions, but certainly heavy decisions on how your children grow up?
My son, yes, one kid. I could only handle one. Um, yes, I do think that there is an understanding that comes. I mean, there's this joke about, you don't understand what it is to be a parent until you are one, right? Like this revenge or something of the future. But sorry, you were talking about a playbook for myself or for others?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you find yourself having a greater sympathy for your folks because they came here without a playbook? There was no example
Mhm.
for them, but there are many generations of folks who followed in their footsteps coming here and then going back. So I just wondered, as a parent, do you find yourself having a greater sympathy for
Mhm.
that?
Absolutely. In fact, I cannot imagine, at midlife, uprooting your whole family, sacrificing your community, your friends, and a great career to like pack it all up, go to a foreign place where you barely understand the language. The predominant language in 1980, Vancouver was English and very much only English. And so it was extremely, extremely difficult. And I don't know that my parents even knew how difficult it would be. My mother, who was always extremely gregarious, and I think her personality comes through in the book, she ended up like basically being a shut-in, right, at home. Like she felt very trapped. The neighbors, none of them really spoke to her because she couldn't understand, and it was always through us kids to translate for her. And I think that now, as a parent myself, I can't imagine having to depend on my kid to be my translator. Like there's this barriers upon barriers, like culturally, linguistically. Just in so many ways, there were just all these roadblocks. And I think my father really thought he could convince the College of Surgeons and Physicians that he should be able to practice here. He had so much experience. He was a surgeon. He wasn't just, I don't know, he had specialties, but I think because of the language barrier and discrimination at the time, it was just impossible. So do I have a lot of sympathy? Yes. And I have so much more admiration for them now. I think my younger self was just, as of course you only live to what you have experience for. And as a 9-year-old, as a 12-year-old, when my parents left, I was pretty resentful and pretty angry and upset and all those natural things. But I didn't understand this part of it. I couldn't have.
I think your story is going to resonate with a lot of people who probably went through this as well around the same time as you did and perhaps after. What do you hope people get out of the book?
Well, I hope that it's up to the readers, of course, but if they've done a good job, that they will feel empathy and sympathy. But not only that, I hope that they just gain better understanding and reach out. And astronaut kids or parents who read it and would like to talk to me. I would love that. They can DM me through Instagram or Facebook because who knows, there could be another book.
I should also stress this has been a very serious conversation, but the book is very funny throughout. So people should also take that away. I hope that it's a very funny, very entertaining book.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks, John, because I hope to inject some levity in there. Yes, it is a serious topic, but I do think there, astronaut kids get up to some shenanigans as well.
You certainly did without giving too much away. All right. The name of the book is The Astronaut Children of Dunbar Street, a memoir. It is published by Douglas and McIntyre. My thanks to author Wiley Wei-Chiun Ho.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.